Everyone knows Henry Ford as the man who put America on wheels, a symbol of industrial progress and mass production, a name associated with innovation, efficiency, and the birth of the modern automobile industry. But this version of the story is only the surface. Because before Henry Ford became a global industrial icon, he was simply a boy growing up on a farm in rural Michigan, a place where life followed the same cycle every single day. Work in the fields, exhaustion, sleep, and then the same pattern repeated again. There was no technology to reduce effort, no systems to improve productivity. Everything depended on human labor and repetition, and for most people, that was just life. But Ford experienced it differently. He didn't just see work as difficult, he saw it as unnecessarily repetitive, wasteful, inefficient. Even as a child, he didn't fully accept the structure around him. While others adapted to farm life, Ford began to observe machines instead. Clocks, tools, mechanical devices, anything that moved or had internal structure. He wasn't studying them in a formal sense. He was trying to understand how motion could be controlled, how systems could be simplified, how effort could be reduced. And this way of thinking slowly became more important to him than the work itself. While others focused on completing tasks, Ford focused on understanding systems. This difference may seem small, but it changed everything, because it meant that Ford was not mentally aligned with the world he was living in. He was already thinking about a different one. At 16, that internal separation became physical. He left the farm and headed toward Detroit. Detroit was not just another city. It was a symbol of industrial transformation, a place where machines were beginning to replace manual labor and where factories were redefining how work was done. Ford did not arrive there as an expert. He had no formal engineering education, no established career, no authority. He arrived with curiosity and a growing belief that labor itself could be redesigned. At the time, this idea was not widely accepted. Most industries still relied heavily on manual craftsmanship. Each product was built individually, slowly, and with high cost. But Ford saw a fundamental inefficiency in that system. If every product had to be built from scratch, then production could never scale. And if production could never scale, then access would always remain limited. That idea would later become the foundation of everything he built. But at this stage, it was only a question forming in his mind. What if production itself could be structured differently? What if work could be broken down into systems instead of individual effort? And what if those systems could be optimized over time? These questions did not have answers yet, but they would soon define the direction of his entire life. In Detroit, Henry Ford entered a world that was changing faster than ever before. Factories were expanding, machines were replacing manual work, and industry was beginning to define the future of America. But Ford was not impressed by the way things were being done. At the time, manufacturing was still slow and expensive. Each product was built individually, often by skilled workers who handled every step of production themselves. This made goods high quality, but also limited in quantity and expensive for most people. Ford saw a problem in that structure. To him, the issue was not the workers. It was the system itself. Too much time was spent switching between tasks. Too much effort was wasted on movement. Too many steps were repeated unnecessarily. He began to think differently about production. Instead of seeing it as craftsmanship, he started to see it as a process that could be broken down into smaller parts. This idea was not common at the time. Most people believed that quality required full attention from one skilled person. Dividing work into smaller tasks seemed unnatural, even risky. But Ford was focused on one thing: efficiency. During his early career, he experimented with different mechanical systems. Some worked, many failed. But each failure gave him a clearer understanding of what did not work in large-scale production. He was not trying to build just a better car. He was trying to build a better system for making cars. And slowly, that system began to take shape. A system where work was divided, where repetition replaced complexity, where speed became more important than craftsmanship. But before that system could fully exist, Ford needed a product that could prove it was possible. That product would become the Model T. When the Model T was introduced in 1908, it did not immediately look like a revolution. It was simple, practical, designed without luxury or unnecessary complexity. But that simplicity was intentional. Ford wanted a car that could survive real conditions, rough roads, rural environments, everyday use by ordinary people who had never owned a vehicle before. At the time, most cars were expensive and fragile. They were designed for wealth, not practicality. The Model T changed that idea completely. It was durable, lightweight, and easy to repair. More importantly, it was designed with accessibility in mind. Ford was not just selling transportation. He was selling independence. For the first time, families outside cities could travel freely. Distance no longer controlled daily life in the same way it once did. But the real transformation did not come from the car itself. It came from how it was produced. Ford introduced a completely new method of manufacturing, the assembly line. Instead of one worker building an entire product, production was divided into small, repeated steps. Each worker was responsible for one specific task. This changed everything. Time required for production dropped dramatically. Costs decreased. Output increased on a scale that had never been seen before in industrial manufacturing. The system was simple, but powerful, and it redefined how industry would function from that moment forward. The Model T became one of the most widely used vehicles in America, not because it was luxurious, but because it was accessible. It was used for transportation, farming, logistics, and even as a utility tool in rural areas. For many people, it was the first time mobility became part of everyday life. But as Ford's influence grew, so did the structure of his control over production. And that would begin to reveal a more complex side of his legacy. As production scaled, Henry Ford's system became more than just a manufacturing innovation. It became a philosophy of efficiency. Every part of production was optimized. Every movement was measured. Every process was standardized. This created unprecedented industrial growth, but it also created strict working environments. Ford believed deeply in control over systems. He applied that same logic not only to machines, but also to people working inside his factories. Efficiency was the priority above everything else. And while this approach led to massive industrial success, it also created tension around his methods and influence. Because Ford was not only changing how cars were built, he was changing how labor itself was structured. Outside of manufacturing, his influence extended into public discussions, ideology, and cultural perspectives of the time. His name became widely known not just for innovation, but also for controversy. This duality defined his legacy. On one side, he made transportation accessible to millions of people. He reshaped mobility, connected rural and urban life, and helped create the foundation of modern consumer industry. On the other side, his strict systems and personal beliefs made him one of the most debated industrial figures in history. And this contradiction is what makes his story difficult to simplify. Henry Ford was not just an inventor, he was a system builder. And the systems he created did not only change industry, they changed society itself. Even today, the structure of modern production still carries elements of the model he helped create. From factories to global supply chains, from manufacturing to logistics, the idea of breaking work into systems remains one of the core principles of modern industry. And in that sense, Henry Ford's influence did not end with his era. It continues inside the way the world still works today.